Let me talk today about the demystification of philosophy. Philosophy has been passed over as a significant tool for change in Philippine society. Good? No. It is to our own peril. For Filipinos, philosophy presents an enigma too far away to reach. It has been relegated to an ivory tower, too high for the common man to delve into, and too much to bear. What are common perceptions now? I always ask my philosophical analysis students to describe philosophy. And most of the time, they come up with descriptions which pierce my heart like barbs on wire penetrating my consciousness. Philosophy has been described as deep, confusing, too logical, weird, pathetic, difficult, out of touch, maker of mountains, out of molehills, and so on, with a lot of commentaries creating the impression that it is an out subject taken by weirdo nerds who love to engage in trysts of getting an intellectual high, by people who have nothing better to do but contemplate on their own existence and float on air, an air of their own making. Or maybe enter seminaries and be priests. I think now that the perception is prevalent among Filipinos, that it is a fact that philosophy is perceived today as an esoteric field of study too deep for the ordinary Juan and Maria to understand. And as such, something devoid of any practical usage. You can almost hear the common Filipino say, ano bang kinalaman ng filosofiya sa presyo ng galunggo? O sa lindol, pandemic, at iba pa? The general belief is that practitioners of philosophy talk about things normal people cannot understand. It is for this reason that the discipline is at times perceived to be detached from the world of objects and physical matter. Having been confined to an abominable state of abstraction, philosophy is perceived to have become irrelevant to the needs of the times. But what is this question of relevance? Mankind has always passed the verdict on its institutions using the criterion of relevance, the lack of which is almost always condemning such institution into oblivion, demise through inutility. Philosophy seems to have been routed by the question of relevance. There is talk now of it being passé, having exhausted all possible avenues available to it and failed to pass the test of utility. Some even go to the extent of saying that philosophy has been dead and buried a long time ago. And what practitioners of philosophy have today are memories of its past glory, very much similar to the contemplation of an old man fast lapsing into a state of senility. So, what's the relationship between philosophy and relevance? I have refused and still refuse to believe the verdict passed to a discipline which I relate to with great respect. And it is my considered opinion that we Filipinos have been provided with an illusion. Philosophy as apt for a captive race. Philosophy for a people who must not be allowed to think on their own. Philosophy as a tool for creating conditions ideal for subjugation. Because I believe that philosophy is relevant. Somewhere along the lines of history, there were errors which led to the present condition. Somehow, the root cause of the condition has to be identified, and philosophy returned to its rightful place in society. What happened? Philosophy was mystified. The philosophy practitioner as an individual existing in society and philosophy as a discipline has a role to play within it. Philosophy did not originate nor end as a quirk of society, but played and should continue to play an active part in changing and modifying it in a continuous dialectical process. And it still continues to be that, an instrument of change. I would endeavor to make the distinction, however, between philosophy as an individual undertaking for purely individual ends and philosophy from the point of view of collective society. It is from the point of view of the latter that the point of relevance has utility. For if only one individual is concerned, relevance would be a superfluity. And here lies the crux of the matter. I think that the point of philosophy as an instrument of change has been all but totally missed by practitioners of philosophy who chose instead to concentrate on their own individual ends, savoring the delights of the mind, basking under the intoxicating effect of intellectual discussion, and forgetting everything else. They satisfy themselves by forming intellectual cliques, separated from the rest of society, living in a world of their own creation, self-styled elites, masters of the intellect. To them, very few people can engage in philosophy. In the Philippines, they make up a distinct class of intellectual ilustrados. They are relevant unto themselves, but not necessarily to society. When this happens, his theory will acquire a glow of mystery, cloaked in a veil of obscurity and metaphor, understandable only to those who are after that uplifting intellectual high, paralyzed in the heat of discussion, transported into a dimension of abstraction, dead to the world. Philosophy mystified. What about today's people? Those from whom the philosophy practitioner directly or indirectly derives his sustenance. For people other than the practitioner and his cohorts, philosophy has no relevance at all that they can see. And they see the philosophy practitioners as inutile, along with philosophy. Philosophy is then thrown down the drain as a field too mystical to be understood, one that belongs to the priests and the deeply religious, or to the godless, the weird, and the esoteric. You might say, well, suits me fine. They can get out of society for all I care. But though there are perils of a philosophy mystified. The mystification process can leave the common tao hating the philosophical concepts for being abstract, not realizing that abstraction itself has its utility. Eventually, they may even hate the discussion process and cease to be critical thinkers, choosing instead to hide behind the comforts of labelous thinking, mudslinging, and blind adherence to dogma. Having been hypnotized by magic and metaphor, forgetting that they have minds with which to think and principles on which actions may be based. Because of this, people may very well be turned into yes persons, autonomous, with mechanical movements well suited for factories or assembly lines, food establishments, acting at a push of a button without consideration, unable to create things themselves, prone to imitate and duplicate existing creations, devoid of humanity. So the verdict is philosophy is useless. Or is it? Of course, for me, it isn't. This condition we find prevalent in Philippine society, and not without dire consequences. Because there's a relationship between philosophy and utility. I believe that there are aspects of the philosophical discipline which are essential ingredients in the development and survival of man in his society, not to mention his continued progress. Aspects which are very much related to his everyday experience. Aspects which are all important factors in the drive towards nation building and the effort towards the achievement of a national consciousness. Aspects which can equip man with enough skills and realizations to possibly solve a lot of societal ills which have continually bugged man and women since time immemorial. The practitioner of philosophy can provide the necessary link between such abstractions and the material world. For there is indeed such a connection. Philosophical training can create a frame of mind which can aptly recognize the limitations of the human mind and body, respect the individuality of other persons, other individuals, and dispense with the illusions which man seemed to have functioned in since early times. Philosophy can contribute greatly towards the realizations of the limitations of language and the structures in society, but not German society. Well, if it's Filipino philosophy, it should be Philippine society. These are only some of the possible utility of the discipline. The skills ingrained from philosophical training may very well provide people with a frame of mind, and with that frame of mind, he may be able to act better on his world with more effectiveness and efficiency, and solve his problems with more resolve, a resolve heretofore unknown in the annals of Philippine history. I dream, do I not? Well, but for me, there's a need for demystification. Mystification is a culprit. It created in the Filipino mind the idea that philosophy per se is inutile and prevented us from benefiting from the bounties for its utilizable aspects. In doing so, I believe the societal development is concomitantly retarded, as a lot of problems we experience can be traced to certain philosophical issues and can be resolved with skills derived from knowledge of such issues. Philosophy can deliver part of the solution to the problems of Philippine society. Without it, I harbor to say that society lacks an important gear which may enable it to hurdle obstacles which impede its development with greater ease. What must then be done? Well, philosophy must be demystified. But what is this demystification process? The demystification process is an attempt to rekindle in the mind of the common Filipino the belief that philosophy is an important instrument towards meaningful and qualitative change in Philippine society. To achieve this, the discipline must be effectively disentangled from the notion that it is inutile by effectively and clearly discussing philosophical concepts and effectively pointing to their particular utility in relation to concrete experiences of the people, along with material and human conditions in society. Philosophy must literally be resold to the people, much like an item of value is sold in the common market. By extolling its benefits and convincing the would-be buyers again that it is of considerable utility. And for this, philosophers have a role. What is the role of the philosophy practitioner? The philosophy practitioner is an essential determinant necessary for the launching and completion of the demystification process. The philosophy practitioner remains as the one who knows the value of philosophically derived skills and who is in a position to assist greatly in the effort towards its demystification. The practitioner must constantly provide concrete examples derived from experience to explain his philosophical principles. More importantly, he must see himself not as removed from, but as part and parcel of his society. But what is the relation between philosophy and society? The practitioner must realize that philosophy is a creature of society, not from an unknown time in the past or a possibility for the future, but one which is in the concrete present, within the milieu of the practitioner himself. Philosophy must be explained within the language genre existing in that particular milieu by using the experiences of the people within it and the principles prevalent in its culture. Like Wittgenstein when he said, meaning is not in the word itself, but in how that word is used. While we may value his individual thought and intellectual independence and may bask in his own abstract world, he must set aside and function first as a member of the social team, with philosophy as his own tool, much like the hammer is the carpenter's tool or the stethoscope the doctor's. Philosophy can then be seized from the ivory tower on which it rests, to be planted on the fertile ground of common experience, within which it can bear fruit. It can stop to serve the interest of the few who belong to the elite and restrictive schools and begin to serve the interests of society. This I call developmental philosophy. Philosophy must endeavor to capture that of the great masses of the people, if such can be done, from supporting wittingly or unwittingly the transformation of the common person into robots and automatons, non-thinking, non-critical thinking individuals. Through the mystification process, it must be able to awaken the critical thinking minds, the thinking skills of Filipinos, and jolt them from their world of submission and blind adherence into that of principled action. Finally, philosophy must churn out works which can, in the here and now, substantially aid the drive for societal development. It must work as a team with other disciplines to try to solve social ills and turn them and this nation into one worth living in. With these things done, philosophy can return to its rightful place in Philippine society as an instrument for change and a tool for development. And my final remarks are as follows. Philosophy need not be dead. It need not be a white elephant, and neither need it be inutile. It, however, needs a thorough overhaul by way of a change in the attitude of the part of the philosophy practitioners and closer cooperation with other social and scientific disciplines in the name of national development. Its mystification has to stop if such overhaul is to be effected. In this light, the task of demystification must relentlessly be pursued by an ever-increasing number of philosophy practitioners from all walks of life. Together, we will redeem the lost glory that is philosophy by replanting it and regenerating it in the hearts and minds of our fellow Filipinos. This is M.H. Mapolang. Thank you.